Single dad applied as a janitor. Then the billionaire CEO couldn't believe who he was. The janitor job application slipped across the polished desk, and the billionaire CEO froze the moment she read the applicant's name. Her confident expression disappeared. Her hands began to tremble, and memories she had spent 15 years trying to forget came crashing back. The exhausted single father, standing outside the interview room, had no idea that his name alone had just shaken one of the richest women in the country. Before we continue this unforgettable story, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to Heartfelt Chronicles. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories that remind the world that compassion always finds its way back. For most people, the man waiting outside looked completely ordinary. His faded blue shirt had been washed so many times that the fabric had almost turned grey. His work boots were worn thin, and dark circles under his eyes revealed years of sleepless nights. At just 38 years old, he looked closer to 50, because life had demanded far more from him than most people could imagine. He was raising his 8-year-old daughter alone, after losing his wife to a sudden illness. Ever since that heartbreaking day, every decision he made revolved around one simple promise: to make sure his little girl never felt abandoned. No matter how difficult life became, the previous year had been especially cruel. The manufacturing company, where he had worked for more than a decade, shut down unexpectedly after financial collapse. Hundreds of employees lost their jobs overnight, including him. Since then, he had accepted every temporary job he could find. He unloaded delivery trucks before sunrise, cleaned construction sites after sunset, and repaired broken furniture for neighbors during weekends. None of those jobs lasted long enough to provide stability. Bills piled higher every month. Rent notices became more threatening. His savings disappeared completely, yet he never allowed his daughter to see his fear. Every evening he still smiled while helping her with homework, reading bedtime stories and pretending everything would soon be all right. One rainy afternoon, while searching through newspaper listings at the local library, he found a simple advertisement. A large international corporation, owned by one of the youngest billionaire CEOs in the country, was hiring maintenance staff and janitors for its headquarters. The salary was modest but steady. Health insurance was included, and employees received educational support for their children. To him, it sounded less like a job and more like a lifeline. The next morning, he carefully ironed his only decent shirt, polished his old boots until they reflected faint light, and placed his application inside a clean folder. Before leaving home, his daughter hugged him tightly and whispered that she believed he would get the job, because good people always found their way. Those innocent words stayed with him during the long bus ride downtown. The corporate headquarters towered over the city like a monument to success. Marble floors, towering glass walls, and expensive artwork surrounded everyone who entered. Executives hurried past, wearing tailored suits, while assistants rushed through the lobby, carrying expensive laptops. Standing among them, he felt invisible. Several applicants glanced at his worn clothes before quietly looking away. He knew they assumed he didn't belong there, but years of hardship had taught him to ignore judgment. The receptionist greeted him politely before asking him to wait. Human Resources reviewed his paperwork first. His work history showed years of reliable employment despite recent hardships. His references praised his honesty, discipline, and willingness to help others. There was nothing extraordinary about his application, except one thing: his full name. Company policy required the CEO to approve final hiring for several internal positions after a recent structuring initiative. It seemed unnecessary for someone seeking a janitor's position, but rules were rules. The application eventually landed on the CEO's desk. She had built her business empire through intelligence, relentless determination, and impossible standards. Investors admired her confidence. Employees respected her discipline, Newspapers described her as fearless. Yet the moment she read the applicant's name, every bit of confidence vanished. She stared silently at the paper before standing abruptly. Her executive assistant asked whether something was wrong, but she simply walked toward the interview room, with a look no one inside the company had ever seen. As she approached the doorway, she saw the tired father sitting quietly, carefully holding the folder that contained everything he had left to offer the world. Time seemed to stop. 15 years earlier, she had been a frightened university student struggling to survive. After losing both parents in a tragic accident, she had hidden her grief behind determination, working multiple jobs while attending classes. One freezing winter evening, exhausted and hungry, she collapsed near a bus station after going nearly 2 days without food. Hundreds of people walked past without stopping. Only one young stranger noticed. That stranger was the same man now sitting outside her office. At the time, he had been a struggling mechanic, barely earning enough for himself. Even so, he gave away the only meal he had bought that day. He paid for her bus ticket home, refused every attempt to repay him, and quietly told her that sometimes the strongest people simply needed someone to believe in them for one day. Before leaving, he scribbled his name on a receipt so she could return the money someday. She kept that small receipt for years inside a notebook that reminded her never to forget the people who helped when no one else would. Life separated them almost immediately afterward. She eventually built one of the country's largest companies. He returned to ordinary life, married, became a father, and later suffered heartbreaking loss after heartbreaking loss. Neither imagined their paths would ever cross again. Standing in the hallway now, the billionaire CEO realized the man who had once saved her dignity was applying for one of the lowest-paying jobs in the very company she owned. She quietly reviewed his employment records, medical insurance gaps, and references before asking her staff to investigate further. What they discovered left everyone speechless. Despite overwhelming financial hardship, he volunteered every month at a local food pantry whenever possible. He repaired broken bicycles for neighborhood children free of charge. He regularly donated blood. More astonishingly, years earlier, he had anonymously paid school lunch fees for children whose families couldn't afford them. Even while struggling himself, the CEO understood something many wealthy people never learned. Character could never be measured by bank accounts. Greatness often wore ordinary clothes. Instead of allowing the interview to proceed as planned, she spent the afternoon visiting the neighborhood where he lived. Without announcing who she was, she observed the small apartment building, spoke with neighbors, and watched from a distance as the single father returned home, carrying groceries. Before entering his apartment, he stopped to help an elderly neighbor carry heavy bags upstairs, even though he was clearly exhausted after a stressful day. That evening, she finally realized the greatest investment she could ever make wasn't another company acquisition. It was honoring the man whose quiet kindness had changed her entire future. The following morning, she invited him back to headquarters. He expected another ordinary interview. Instead, he entered a conference room where senior executives were waiting. His confusion grew as the CEO personally thanked him, not for applying, but for a kindness he barely remembered. He struggled to recall the freezing winter evening from years ago because helping strangers had never seemed extraordinary to him. It was simply the kind of person he believed everyone should try to become. The CEO explained that one meal, one bus ticket, and one act of compassion had given a hopeless young woman enough strength to continue pursuing her dreams. Without that moment, she doubted she would have become the leader she was today. She smiled warmly before telling him that while he had applied as a janitor, she could never allow someone with his integrity to spend another day worrying about survival. Instead of offering him the maintenance position, she created a new role overseeing employee community outreach and facility operations, a position that combined leadership, mentorship, and service. The salary was several times higher than he had expected. It included full medical benefits, housing assistance, educational funding for his daughter, and opportunities for career advancement. He stood silently, overwhelmed by emotions he had kept buried for years. After months of rejection, endless worry, and quiet suffering, hope had finally found him again. His daughter cried tears of happiness when he returned home carrying the employment letter. For the first time in months, they celebrated without worrying about unpaid bills waiting on the kitchen table. They ordered pizza, laughed together, and dreamed about a future that no longer seemed impossible. Over the following years, the single father became one of the company's most respected leaders. Employees admired his humility. New workers found encouragement in his quiet guidance. Community outreach programs expanded dramatically because he understood what struggling families truly needed. Thousands of people benefited from initiatives inspired by someone who had once believed he was only qualified to mop floors. The billionaire CEO never forgot the lesson hidden inside that ordinary job application. Success meant very little if it caused people to overlook the quiet heroes standing right in front of them. Every promotion, every charitable program, and every company policy afterward reflected that belief. Sometimes the person asking for the smallest opportunity has already changed someone's life in ways the world never noticed. Kindness has a remarkable way of returning, often years later, and when it is needed most. A single selfless decision made without expecting recognition can echo across decades and transform lives beyond imagination. Before this story comes to an end, please tell us in the comments, what is the kindest thing a stranger has ever done for you? Or what act of kindness would you never forget? Your story may inspire someone who desperately needs hope today. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe to Heartfelt Chronicles. Every interaction helps us continue sharing stories that remind the world that compassion, courage, and second chances are never wasted. The billionaire CEO thought she was reviewing an application for a janitor. Instead, she rediscovered the man whose kindness had built the future she was living, and the single father who walked into that building believing he was worth only a cleaning job, walked out with something far greater than a career. He walked out with proof that genuine kindness never disappears. It simply waits for the right moment to come home.